Sometimes you kind of pinch yourself. We are here talking and debating the future of our civilizations, because if we don't address the climate change challenge, we will face runaway climate change, which imperils us all. So this is hugely significant, of historic international importance, that we get it right. I'm encouraged. The first 2 or 3 days have been quite positive. I think Dr. Sultan Al Jabbar and his team have done a good job. I think the fact that it started with, firstly, the agenda being agreed, that wasn't always possible in the past, quickly, but also the loss and damage fund, which was critically important, and pledges to make it operational. And I think now we need to build on that confidence and that momentum to get agreement on the response to the global stocktake, which is assessing how are we doing. We're not doing enough is the answer. And also how we bring climate justice into the solutions, that we see the developing countries, which are not seeing the investment they need to be part of the climate solution, delivered. So that in the next 10 days, I think, will be the centre, from my perspective as an Irish minister, what we're looking to try and support and enhance. I think you have to see them like stepping stones. The Paris was the big stepping stone, the big leap. And as Sultan Al Jabbar said yesterday, we're not small steps now, we're talking about big leaps. And there was a leap in Paris. We need, similarly in the last 3 years in Glasgow, we agreed to think about a new quantified goal on financing. In Bridgetown Initiative, Mia Mottley, the Barbados Prime Minister, said correctly that we need to bring justice to the finance systems. In Nairobi this September, the Kenyan President Ruto, I think, really changed the framing by putting climate and development together, seeing them going together. So this is another critical stepping stone, and we have to leap from here into the ongoing evolution, but it has to be a leap. And it has to be a particular leap in international finance systems, because we're not on track, and we need to give real clarity how we finance to get back on track. Well, first, I think there was a step forward last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, agreeing on the principle of a fund, and we've done well now to have it established, have it operationalised. The pledges that have been given, the UAE 100 million, Germany the first 2 similar amounts, that allows us to set it up. We have to learn by doing. We have to make sure we don't make the mistakes of some earlier funds, which often took 8 years to establish. It has to be quick. And therefore, I think the location in the World Bank allows us to set it up quickly for the first 4 years. I do think it's important that we also learn the lessons of other funds which in the past haven't gone to the poorest countries. We need to make sure there is a protection for them in the funding, not to restrict eligibility for other countries that will need it, but just to make sure that they're not forgotten about, which they can be sometimes. And I think we will learn by doing. We have to, unfortunately, the loss and damage is a reality we're all living with, but the fund will be one of the elements in helping us address it. But ultimately, if we don't also invest in the adaptation and mitigation, then the loss and damage will become incalculable. If we have runaway climate change, we can't stop the loss and damage. So we also you need all three. We need loss and damage investment. We need to adapt to the climate change that's already coming to reduce the amount of loss and damage, but also we need to invest at a huge, something like 4.5 trillion a year early in the next decade is the scale of funding we need, the International Energy Agency says. And in the developing world, outside China, something like 1.5 to 1.9 trillion a year in early next decade. And as an energy minister, I know that it takes you 10 years to develop a project. So we have to, that's why we need a leap today. In electricity, we're about 40% renewable, and by the end of this decade, that will be 80%. Mainly wind. We're one of the windiest countries on the planet. We have, and we're a small island. Our sea area is 7 times our land area, so we go out into the Atlantic, and that's where the wind is at the strongest. So for us, offshore wind will be a significant source of energy. I think one of the interesting projects we have, which I think maybe is useful for other countries, we do have a carbon tax, and we have both the European emissions trading scheme, where on all large industrial applications it's about 80 euros a tonne, and on the domestic smaller business scale we have a domestic tax, carbon tax, which goes at about 52 euros a tonne. It goes up every year, and we use the revenue to retrofit our buildings to make them more energy efficient, to protect the most vulnerable, the lower income people at home, and to help our farmers as well. So I think in Ireland, of examples of what we do that's interesting, that's probably quite unique, and I think it is working, and therefore it should be of interest to other countries. Well, I always remember, and I cite this, I was Energy Minister from 2007 to 2011, and I recall we voted for the UAE to be the home for IRENA. And we did it at a time because there's always been good relations between Ireland and the UAE, close relations in many instances. A lot of students come to Dublin to study. A lot of horses have a UAE flag on them with UAE Irish horses. So we've always had good, close relations. But I think for me as Energy Minister, the success of IRENA is one of the examples of where we played a very small part in having that located here, but I'm glad to have done so.